Hello friends and welcome back. Today we are going to learn about argument replacement in Magento 2. This is a technique to customize the core of Magento 2 and is learned just after the preference creation because it's bit enhanced to preference creation in Magento. We will be discussing couple of key pointers today, and the pointers are based on the questions that one see in the exam, and simultaneously to understand the overall concept of argument replacement so that you can use it in your real time practices. I've also created a sample class for demo purpose, and we will be looking into this class how argument replacement is going to perform the changes that we may need in our real time scenarios. And also we will be building our understanding how Magento's object related functionality should be studied and how we should go further with this. But to start, first of all, we go to the slide, and the first pointer that I have collected is that this is a class replacement system for Magento 2. So whenever you have a class, let's say in your customer class you have address as a dependency. Address is further a class. Now if you want to replace that class, what you earlier used was a preference creation where you replace this class coding with your own coding. But with argument replacement you can tell customer class that whenever you loads, just replace your address class argument with my personal argument. So this is a class replacement technique. We will be discussing further that why it's useful and where we should be using this in Magento's customization. But let's go to the next pointer first because it's really very important. Argument replacement is a powerful feature that gives us full control via configuration of what the object manager will inject in. And actually I have picked this line from an article published by Alan Storm, and he has ensured that his article is written in a manner that a person who don't belongs to Magento's understanding can even understand argument replacement. So I'll recommend you to go there and understand his article completely. Just read it once and I'm sure that you will get better insight onto this. I know that his articles are a bit longer, but they have really very good amount of depth inside them. But in this line he has used the word object manager. So again, whenever we discuss about Magento's object system, we earlier discussed about preferences, object managers were there. So Magento's object creation is dependent on object manager. So if we can give some hints or some ideas to object manager that whenever you're going to perform this thing, just change it by this particular thing that I need, and the object manager is capable to do that. So it's an intermediate layer, so we can perform various enhancements that we need in our daily life. We are just using object managers powers. Now I have collected couple of pointers for you where the first thing is, this is the way how we should be understanding Magento's objects. First of all, you should learn what objects are and how to create objects, and they are the part of core PHP and object oriented programming understanding. After that, you understand object manager and why Magento has created a centralized object manager system to create all his objects. And the answer is that if he didn't created object manager, a centralized system, then objects would have been creating from various places and there is no single control. So it gives them a single control. Simultaneously, any modification that we want in our object creation, we can just make this modification in our object manager and we will get the needed output. Plus, Magento wanted and developers to have certain practices or certain methods by which they can customize the code, and then that feature can also be implemented using object manager. Next thing you should understand is dependency injection in Magento. And in dependency injection we have already studied that whenever we write a class name in our constructor, Magento is capable to understand that via its auto loading and dependency injection feature. And in DI, Magento uses object manager to create the objects for that particular class. After that, we studied about the preferences in Magento 2, and Here again we saw that object manager performed the key role when we defined our nodes in XML file, di.xml file. Object manager is capable to understand that di.xml file, and by our instruction written in di.xml, object manager just changed the class that were instantiated at that particular time. The same we are going to do with argument replacement. Object manager will be used here, and we will be changing the arguments of a particular class via this. So a real-time scenario for this will be, in Magento we have a customer class and its child class is a customer's address class. So most of the time you will see that a customer class is called, and in its constructor or in somewhere in its arguments there is a address class. Now if you have to modify your customer's address functioning, one thing that you can do is you can create a preference for the customer address class and write your own code, but that will be implemented on all the places. And to ignore this, what you need to do is, despite creating preferences, you can just create a argument replacement functioning by which you can tell Magento specifically that when your particular class is going to be extended, then only you will have to replace your address dependency with this particular dependency that I want you. So in this manner, this is not a global thing and you can restrict it for certain classes only. Also, in future we will be discussing about the virtual types and the object manager, how we use object manager for virtual types, and then we will go to the proxy, which again uses object manager. Okay, so let's go to our slide once. The third point is the object manager and dependency injection block us from using normal constructor parameters. So whenever in Magento's core you will see that we can directly create the objects using our object manager, but when we are going to create an object using object manager, we cannot pass the constructor argument. For example, if I am creating a object for example class using my object manager, then in object manager's create function I pass the full path for example class, but I can't pass the arguments for this particular class, and that's why it's a bit restrictive. So that is also overcome using our process to build argument replacements. Next thing is, it's possible to replace or inject objects with a non-object, but okay, well, next point we will discuss just after getting a basic understanding on how this thing is going to work. So here I have created a class and I have kept it similar to Alan Storm's class so that it's a bit easier for you to understand. This class name is example, and there are a couple of properties for this. In our constructor we have a couple of arguments, and these arguments are assigned certain values and so on. So here we have this particular argument scalar 1, and scalar 1 has been assigned a value foo. Now what happens is, whenever I am going to create an object for example class, I am restricted that my scalar 1 will always have a value named as foo, because my object manager don't allow me to change, to push the constructor argument, so that I would have been able to change this value. But with the argument replacement, what we can do is we can tell our object manager that whenever you're going to extend or you're going to work with this class, if you see scalar 1 somewhere as an argument, and just change it whatever I want you to change. So in your di.xml file, again you're going to push this code. And why di.xml file? Because object managers are capable to understand di.xml, and our modification can be achieved using that file. Now in the config node is same, so I'll just remove this for better understanding. It's common for our di.xml file. Now we have a new parent or second level node named as type. In type you can pass the name of your class, so I'll pass the full path for my example class. And in arguments we have argument node, where I can tell that whenever your argument named as scalar 1, why scalar 1? Because we have the name as scalar 1 here. in constructor we have the name as scalar1. Okay, so just relate it with this, not this or anything else. Scalar, in our constructor we have scalar1. We define its type, it is a string, just change the foo with the bar, and that's all you need to do to tell Magento that whenever you're going to instantiate or create an object of example class, you have to change the scalar whose value was earlier foo, you can change it to bar. And this functioning is used at various places in Magento 2, and one of the most suitable example would have been the search functioning. Magento uses various type of search, and for all these searches Magento have not created a separate search classes. What Magento has done is they have created a common search class, and in the constructor argument they have just changed the argument's name based on our selection, that what type of search we want elastic search or a solar search, what kind of search is there, the argument is replaced and the further functioning is done accordingly. So, well, that's the overall concept, but it has a very wide range of implementation. Why? First thing is it overcomes a problem with preference. So in your Magento you will see that lots of developers are going to create preferences for you, or any extension that you're going to purchase, they have preferences. So first thing to understand is this should be your last method to modify Magento's core functioning. We will be discussing various other things like preference, argument replacements, virtual types and proxies for modifying core. But preference should be kept on the least priority, because apart from that we have our observers and plugins as well. So with preference, what problem we have is, in preference we define that this particular class, for example if I have created a preference for example class, this class would have been completely replaced throughout my system to be used by to be understood as some other class that I would have defined in preference, as discussed in previous lecture. But with argument replacement we can tell that whenever you are going to access this particular class, you just need to change one dependency or one argument. It's like very narrow, the preference is very bulky, and it's also not update proof. Whenever there is an update in core class, and if you have created a preference for that core class, your Magento will break. So the replacement is for preference is argument replacement. Next thing is it gives us a functioning that overcomes object manager's problem. That problem was no option to change constructor argument. And the third thing that we can achieve is our modifications. So if you need to force Magento that every product should be studied as a simple product, you can define the class and force Magento to study every product as simple product just by making some changes in the arguments. And all of your functioning, whenever you receive any kind of modification job, then first of all you think them, and I would suggest you to go from down to up in this hierarchy only, to select your best way to customize Magento. And now we will go to our slide again. On the fourth pointer we had, it's impossible to replace an injected object with a non-object. So fortunately it is possible to replace an injected object with a different object. Okay, so in our class we had we replaced this scalar value from foo to bar, but we could have also replaced our example 1 argument from to some other argument. But whenever we are going to work with object managers, we will have to define a new object manager only. Otherwise if I am going to define a foo or bar value, it won't work, it will give us an exception. So objects can be replaced by objects only, but scalars can be replaced by some of the arrays even without defining that. I'm not sure this is a problem or a feature, because if I have a scalar and I tell Magento that I have an object and the value I need is example argument 5, it should work for them. but this won't be object any further, it will become a array. And for strings we can easily replace, for other values we can easily replace, but just to note that the type is kept same, but for scalar we can change type as well. And that was written in the fourth pointer, which said that we should be working only with our objects and replacing them with other objects, and there is a way to inject object with a different object. Okay. And class rewrite or selective rewrite, well, this is a very good word named as selective rewrite. In Magento 1 we had class rewrite functioning, where we defined or tell Magento that whenever your this particular class is called, you should change it to this particular class. But here we can tell Magento that whenever your this class is called and its argument is this class, then only you will rewrite, otherwise you won't. So from my customer I could have changed the argument for address, but if my address class is called from some other class as well, then it wouldn't have been changed. But if we have used preferences or Magento once rewrite functioning, then address would have been changed from all the places. But here we define that address should be changed only when it is called from my from my customer class. Well, that was all. Again, I want to highlight this to you as deep as I could have. You should be going to selecting the perfect process for creating a Magento module, and to do this you should go from bottom to top in this line, and the preferences should be the least method. Argument replacement can be used on top of that. Virtual types are actually enhancements of argument replacement only, and have been widely used. I would recommend you to go for virtual types. And proxies are actually more sort of performance optimization thing. So virtual types and proxies, if you are a good developer, you will be working with these two. Argument replacement, you can go, just try to avoid preferences, but if you have to, yes, you can go for that. And well, that was all for this lecture, and let me know if you have any problems, and further lecture we will be discussing on the implementation, and we'll try one hands-on example as well. Thank you. Bye.